Well, hello everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Today's webinar, part of the Go Global webinar series. The subject is how to sell online in Southeast Asia with a special focus on Indonesia and Vietnam. Thank you very much for joining us wherever you are, wherever you may be, and we can see from the registrations that you are indeed from all around the world. So whether it is daytime with you or nighttime, we welcome you. My name is John Worthington. I am the CEO here at IBT Online, and today I have the huge pleasure of being the introducer for today's Go Global webinar program. I am back in our London offices today with Susanna Hardy, our Director of Client Services, and we are very pleased to be joined by Danielle Bellefleur, who is Chief Country Representative for Indonesia for working for Tractus based over in Indonesia and is calling in today from there, with Antonio Sequeiros, who is Consulting Manager for Tractus in Asia, who is based in Vietnam. So today, as you can see, we're using some pretty useful online technologies to bring you this webinar, which, considering the subject itself, is sort of an endorsement of using online to help you grow your business. We have a very educational webinar and program prepared for you. In the background, prior to this, Susanna, Danielle, and Antonio have been working hard with a top priority to provide you with lots of useful information, practical takeaways to help you be successful in selling online in Southeast Asia, and specifically Indonesia and Vietnam. Before we get going, I have the pleasure of presenting a little bit of housekeeping. Just to let you know, this webinar is one in a series. We have been running this webinar program for over 2 years now, so there is a rich catalog of recorded webinars available to you on demand. If you go to www.ibtonline.com/resources, you'll find them. And the webinars to come are at www.ibt.onl/US resources webinars. So there are many subjects that we can cover for you, and typically, as is today, we're going to be presenting today's webinar in 45 minutes. A brief introduction by myself, and then I'll be handing you to Susanna on your screen on the left, and Danielle top right, and Antonio bottom right, for today's presenters and presenting the subject. There will be 4 polls, so please be ready with your mics and be attentive. We'll be announcing the polls and then asking your participation. There's plenty of time for questions. We've got questions planned at the end. You can see from your screen there the questions box. Please open it up. Share your concerns, share your questions with us, and we will answer them at the end. There's also a chat box curated, so please, again, join us on the chat box. At the end of the webinar, there will be a brief survey, so please, I'll announce that at the end. Do stay with us. Give us an extra 30 seconds of your time to complete the survey. That helps us better serve your interests. And finally, do know that we are recording this webinar, which will be sent to you with a link on Friday. So now you can just kick back, whether you're having coffee or an evening cocktail, enjoy yourself, and we hope that you have lots to learn on this webinar. So I'm just going to take a second to introduce Susanna. Susanna, our host. Today, Susanna is Head and Director for Client Services at IBT Online. Susanna heads up our global operations. Susanna has been helping companies use the internet and get online. Susanna is international herself by definition, being half German, half British, and has been educated both in the US, that is over in New York, and in Europe in Brussels. Susanna currently resides in London. And Susanna's expertise in online, well, she'll be presenting that later today. Can I say a word on Danielle? Danielle leads Tractus's engagements in Indonesia, advising on a diversity of local and regional investment and international development projects. The Indonesia office supports clients in terms of understanding and navigating the Indonesian markets, covering a variety of sectors from technologies to mining, with business services, of course, including legal and payment processing. Daniel has over 9 years of experience living and working in the Southeast Asia, a true professional with a master's in international affairs and focused on Southeast Asian economics. Antonio set up the Tractus Vietnam office back in 2007 and is currently lead consulting manager for Southeast Asia and is responsible for overseeing and managing the Vietnam-focused projects that come through Tractus. Antonio has been directly involved in conducting strategy, feasibility studies, multinational manufacturing and service investments in Asia, and has more than 15 years working experience in Asia, in places like Vietnam, China, and Hong Kong. So as you can see, covering from Daniel to Antonio, we're bringing you skill sets, knowledge, and local understanding. Now, before we kick off and I hand over, just 2 words on IBT Online as a company and Tractus. I'm going to start with Tractus then. Tractus founders and directors are US Americans. The headquarters is based over in Bangkok in Thailand. They have 8 offices across Asia. So that is in China, India, Indonesia, Hong Kong, Myanmar, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. Tractus professional team of over 60 multinational, multicultural professionals with a deep and wide knowledge. So certainly when you contact Tractus, you know you're going to be in good, experienced hands with regards to Southeast Asia. Over the years, Tractus have worked for more than 1,000 projects and supported investments to the tune of US $5 billion. So a high level of knowledge and understanding and experience at your disposal. 2 words on IBT Online. IBT is a private company. IBT, that stands for International Business and Technologies. So it's all about technology, and it's all about using technology to go global, to go to market. IBT Online provides website localization. There'll be some in-depth explanation in exactly what we mean by that, and of course international local online marketing. And all of that is about growing sales, it's about growing brands, and it's about developing business and doing that globally. So IBT Online works with companies to establish and manage their global online presence. And when we're doing that, and doing that in conjunction with a company like Tractus, we're providing a solution that enables companies to be very successful in their go-to-market strategy and their go-to-market execution. So enough said by me. It is with great pleasure that I hand over to Susanna. And Susanna, are you there?
Yes, John, thank you very much. And thank you all for attending our webinar. That's great. We're going to be talking first. I'm going to get Daniel to tell us a bit about Indonesia. Then Antonio will be talking more about Vietnam, and interweaving throughout sort of the theme of online, e-commerce, and best practices there. Then I'm going to round up with some case studies and examples after explaining a bit what we mean really by website localization and international marketing. Just before I hand over to Daniel, though, I just wanted to share a little slide with you here. It's and by the way, there's way too much on this slide. I realize that, but as John said, you are going to get all this by email as well. It's just really as an illustration of the size, depth, and growth of digital flows in today's economy. You know, I think 15 years ago, 2000, there was virtually no digital flows at all, and this is now forecast to continue growing. For example, for bandwidths, growing by a factor of 9 times over the next 4 years. Digital flows, as this comes from a McKinsey report, which they estimate now in digital flows are actually a more impact on our GDP growth than the trade in the traditional goods and services. I think what's really important, though, for me, from our understanding, from our perspective, is that these digital flows just open up the global economy to pretty well any company with a good internet connection. It reduces and pulls down a lot of the barriers to entry that exporters used to have, and changes a lot of those rules and sort of levels some of that playing field. And this is a similar sort of message in this slide, just really to say that from our perspective, what we see is that using online tools allows mid-cap companies to really extend and reach out in their export ambitions. It is a huge tool to use for a mid-sized company, and allows them to punch up above in the weight right there with the big players. For us, therefore, exporters who use online and who use sort of a digital literacy, what we call digital literacy, will be winners in the coming years. So I just really wanted to put that out there. You know, together with the fall in large corporation trade as a percentage, you really see this incredible growth in mid-sized companies reaching out globally. John, before I pass, sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Susanna. So well done to SME exporters. And in that case, it is time. Can I launch the first poll?
Please.
So please, if you're ready, here you go. This is absolutely aimed at you. Here we go. I'm launching the poll now. So please, are you currently doing business in Southeast Asia? So please share, how are you doing? Are you doing yes on your own with a local partner? Is it online, /m commerce only? Are you thinking about it, or you know? So I'm getting, let me see, 25% are saying yes on their own, 50% yes with a local partner, 26% thinking about it, 8% saying no. That's very interesting. We're going to keep this information. You all have this information. So I'm closing it down. There we go. That's my little horn for the end of this one. Poll number 1 is done. And thank you for sharing with us. Susanna, back to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, John. Daniel, just straight over to you. Tell us a bit about Indonesia.
Yes, good morning and good evening, and to all the range of the people attending on this webinar. It's my pleasure to be presenting Indonesia, where I was talking to some of my colleagues and friends coming over with business relations here in Indonesia that are from the United States, and they said Indonesia is the most invisible country in terms of global commerce and international affairs for its size and reference in the actual national economies. And so it's predicted that Indonesia will be one of the, McKinsey predicts it will be the 7th largest economy by 2030, while SBS predicts that it will be the 5th largest economy within the same time frame. And so this is a bold statement for the development prospects and the potentials of Indonesia. And so why is that? And so the big reason is because it is indeed a country of 257 million people, which could range to 265 million people if they take the real statistics and the birth rates into account. The GDP is almost reaching $1 trillion, where the average age range is a young population of an average of 28.4 years, and so they have a positive population demographic which will fuel growth into the future. And this is important because these are people that are becoming incredibly sophisticated in their uses of technologies that are seeking out for added value. And although in comparison to, say, the United States or the United Kingdom, on a per capita GDP basis of about $3,500, they're at a much less basis of the consuming power of more developed countries. This is the growth potential of where they're starting to consume a greater amount of goods and services. So improved healthcare, buying cars and vehicles, branded goods, fashion items, and international foods and beverages. And so although Indonesia is indeed progressing, there are challenges to doing business in the country, and of course, being that it's an archipelago of over 17,000 islands, transporting your goods and services across the nation can be difficult, and I'm happy to go into more details about those in the coming slides. Next slide, please. This is just a basic breakdown of the Indonesian economy, where services and industry are indeed dominating. The services trade has been growing incredibly as the tourism industry is growing in importance, and Indonesia continues to improve logistics and transportation to attract more international travelers to the beauty and fantastic places to visit across the country. Communications and online infrastructure are becoming more available, where it's one of the hottest e-commerce growth markets in the world right now. And then business services are in high demand as companies become more sophisticated. For industry, the industry is, Indonesia has an abundance of natural resources, whether capitalizing on and trying to add value. And so the mining industry, which they have large deposits of copper, gold, bauxite, and a number of other mineral resources, have driven the economy, but they're trying to process those goods more. And of course, with a large population that are upwardly mobile in their earning capacity, they're buying more cars, as well as their housing. And so families typically live together, and so they'll purchase and live together in larger and nicer homes as time goes on. And then agriculture is, of course, a staple of the society that they're also trying to add value to, as it's been based off of base level commodities for some time now. Next slide, please. And the growth is coming. And so I'm based here in Jakarta, and I've seen an incredible progress in this country and in this city over the past 6 years that I've lived here. And so we have a more progressive government that's looking to improve the infrastructure to take out the bottlenecks of the traffic that comes here, with living in a city that has between 15 and 20 million people, depending on the day and the time. And then we have an incredible variety of food and beverage restaurants that are coming in with wide international international fairs that you would be quite familiar with in your own home countries, while companies such as IKEA, in luxury goods are opening up their sales outlets here, because there is quite a large market. And there was a study by the Boston Consulting Group that expects that in 2015 that there were about 74 million middle class and affluent consumers, where it's expected that in 2020, which is just in the next 3 years, that there will be 141 million across Indonesia, across 54 locations in different cities across the country. And so this is the kind of growth that Indonesia is experiencing, which you can expect that both on the economic development and business side, that the companies become increasingly sophisticated as their consumers demand an increasingly quality basket of goods. Next slide, please. And this is a large part due to online shopping, online sales, and the advancements technologies have done to the Indonesian economy. And so currently there are approximately 133 million internet users. And here's a breakdown with this pie graph we show here in the top left corner. And so this is larger than most countries on Earth. So the people using online services are larger than most countries in general. The products that are being purchased online typically are tickets, whether this is for concerts or plane tickets or bus tickets. These are definitely very popular. Household goods, hotels are booked online now, fashion is purchased, and then there's a thing that's interesting in Indonesia. There's a large number of social shoppers and social sellers. And so these are people that are selling goods and services through social media, which could be a wide range of products. Well, we also have a number of internet service providers that are doing commodities and business-to-business sales as well. And so through their online browsing mechanisms, a vast majority of this is through mobile. And so mobile has been the most reliable and the most convenient. So I was reading an article just the other day that was saying that Indonesian online shoppers like to purchase their goods at work when they have connection to a quality Wi-Fi just right after lunch. And so 67.8% of these online consumers are shopping around that time and looking for a wide variety of goods and services, and usually on their mobile, because maybe they don't want their boss knowing that they're just shopping online when they're supposed to be working. And so this is, I think, a thing that most companies deal with, but people still like to do their thing when they're consumers online. And they're often going to companies like this of Lazada, which was recently bought by Alibaba, and is quite active in an online marketplace here in Indonesia. And then we have a number of local competitors such as Tokopedia, OLX, and Matahari Mall that are also working in this marketplace. But Gojek is really the standout startup company in Indonesia that is revolutionizing at least life here in Jakarta, and somewhat so in the other urban cities, and is starting to reach out into the rural areas where they provide a wide range of services where you can get shipped to your house, made, your food delivered, you can get maintenance services, and you can order this all on your mobile phone through Gojek. And so it's an incredible transformation that I've realized here in Indonesia over the past 6 years. And so my life is certainly more convenient due to these new technologies coming on and the increasingly accessible purchasing power of online sales. Next slide, please. And here's just a little bit more of the demographics of how it goes and what's going on in B2B and B2C. And so a majority of the people feel that it's safe to buy online. Indonesia has taken some advances for consumer protections and purchasing online. They're relatively strict with the people that can accept and conduct online transactions. And so this has provided a buffer for people to be comfortable with online purchases. Now the challenge is for exporters is how do you actually receive payment, because locally the most common methods to induct payment is through an ATM transfer or cash on delivery. As you can see here in the top right hand corner, it is quite rare that people are paying for online transactions through credit card, and credit card usage is quite small, while services such as PayPal are not adequately utilized. And so, you know, companies can have their sales method where maybe they set up an online sales and credit card processing system through their personal business site. But for the typical consumer, if you're doing business to consumer, you will need to find a way to structure your payment system to be able to reach the masses. And now with B2B, you can often do business invoicing and transactions as necessary. And so again, these companies in the left-hand corner, Indo Network is a large business-to-business e-commerce site that links commodities in a variety of other goods that you can only dream of. And then we also do have the international social media sites that again are connecting small entrepreneurs and people that will import a number of international goods and services to distribute across Indonesia. Next slide, please. And just to wrap up, there's plenty of information that I could give you about Indonesia, but you know the reason to consider it is because it is the largest and most upwardly mobile country on earth right now that is sustainable. Although a number of countries, developed countries, might be pulling back from internationalization and connecting with new markets, Indonesia is in a good spot of where it's got a strong commodity base, that it's modernizing its business and regulatory environment. It has a young population that is technology capable and has increasing incomes that will generate growth into the future. So 260 million people plus, that are looking to buy more stuff and have a wider variety of a higher quality. And so what does this mean for business to consumer? So fast-moving consumer goods and food and beverage, both local and international, are increasingly available and popular. The automotive industry is, although last year was a tough year, given the global economic downturns with China's slowdown and changes in the United States Fed interest rates, it has been picking up and is looking back on track, while healthcare is also increasingly important, and people are becoming better aware of the healthcare needs of how to do preventative health, as well to have better healthcare services to keep their life going forward, as well as their children. And then opportunities for B2B, and so again, all companies are looking to upgrade and enhance their services to gain market share. And at Tractus, we work for a number of customers that are our clients that are looking for B2B assistance in Indonesia. So we've worked across mineral process engineering, where we've linked high-tech German engineering firms to local Indonesian commodities processors that want to improve the quality of their end-use product. We've also looked for intermediate inputs that go into various products that can improve the value and the quality of their end-use sales. We've also worked for automotive companies that are looking to source raw commodities from Indonesia. And so there are an abundance of opportunities here to both sell and to cooperate with local countries. And so I believe we have another poll here, and then I'm happy to take other questions at the end of the webinar if you have them on Indonesia.
Well, Daniel, absolutely. There's a poll number 2, but before I just launch that, I just want to say thank you. That was fascinating and so much useful, practical information and upbeat. I'm glad. I mean, that is very, very interesting and totally relevant to this poll, which I'm about to launch. So please, are you ready? Here we go. Here's poll number 2 launching now. What is your main export challenge of Southeast Asia? So here you go. Is it about the right local partner? Are there logistics challenges and supply chain? Is it import duties and regulations, payment and other? And of course, just to be clear, you know, Tractus provides solutions for these. This is going to help us to help you. And if I give you some feedback, 67% are saying it's about the right local partner. And indeed, I would share that with you. Experience tells us it's the same. 20% nevertheless are talking about import duties and regulations, and 12% are saying other. So I think I'm going to close that. And that's also to thank Daniel very much indeed for doing a great presentation. And I'm going to hand back to Susanna, I believe it is.
Yes, thank you very much. I just really want to pass straight on to Antonio, if you're there. Talk us about Vietnam. Antonio?
Yeah, thank you, Susanna. I hope everybody can hear me well. Thank you for attending today. So I'm going to talk about Vietnam. You will see that the structure of my presentation is very similar to what we got in Indonesia. So there we go. Basically, Vietnam is a relatively small country in terms of size, something similar to Finland, but is very, very populated. We're talking about 90 to 95 million people, and the expectation is that by 2020, that 90 million people is going to become 100 million. So out of these people, around 50% of them are below 30 years old, so in a similar way as Indonesia is a very, very young population. The other interesting feature about Vietnam and Vietnam development is that Vietnamese economy has tripled in size in just 10 years. In the last 10 years, Vietnam has grown by 3 times, and the expectations are that this growth is going to continue at the rate of around 6–7% annually. That's one of the fastest growing economies in the world. This amazing development is very much based on 2 factors. One is the development of a consumer class and also foreign investment. initially for export manufacturing. That was at the beginning something like 10-15 years ago. Now that's still going on, but already shifting to foreign investment focus on offering services and developing infrastructure and heavy industries. Next slide. As you can see here, the structure of the Vietnamese economy is similar to Indonesia. Interesting thing is Vietnam has changed from a purely agricultural-based economy to a service economy. As you can see there, services is the leading sector, followed by industry and agriculture, but agriculture still accounts for 17.4%. But in terms of employment, agriculture employs more than 40% of the population. So from an economic standpoint, it's a service and industrial economy. From an employment standpoint, it's still an agricultural economy. Most of the population is in the countryside. Only 35% are urban population. The most developing activities in industry, the most interesting products are garments. Vietnam is one of the leading exporters of garments in the world. Electronics, furniture, and from agricultural products you might not know, but you might be eating seafood coming from Vietnam. No matter whether you are based in Europe or in the United States, Vietnam is exporting huge amounts of seafood to Europe and the United States. Vietnam is the biggest exporter of coffee in the world, specifically Robusta coffee, and I think it's the second biggest exporter of rice in the world. So still, agriculture sector is losing its relevance in the country, but still plays a big role. Next. In terms of opportunities for doing business in Vietnam, Vietnam offers very good opportunities in the mid and long term. Basically, per capita income in Vietnam today is around $2,100, and to put that in perspective, I want to compare it with Indonesia, which is around 3,600, and Thailand, which is 5,500. So if you look at countries in the region with similar characteristics in terms of population, natural resources, you can see that there is still a lot of room for Vietnam to grow. The other interesting thing is that the consumer middle class will be around 33 million in 2020, which is like three times what it was in 2014. So it only in a very short period of time, just 6 years, the consumer class has tripled. Same as the economy. What the economy took 10 years to triple, in terms of consumer class, it only taking like 6 years. So this is just an example of how fast things are moving in Vietnam. The other interesting thing is that nowadays most of the consumer class is based in basically two places, which is Hanoi in the north and Ho Chi Minh City in the south. In the next 6-10 years, the expectation is that this is going to be spreading all around the country. So it's going to be reaching many areas that are not being, there are basically no consumers. So that's another interesting thing. This significant growth in consumer class basically is fueling the development of several sectors. And to give you some figures on what are the growth rates that we are looking at, food and beverage sectors is growing by like 18% annually. Retail is growing by 12%. Pharmaceutical and healthcare products and services is growing by 17%. So it's not unusual to find growth rates of between 15 and 20% annually, which is something quite exciting for people trying to sell products and services. Next slide. Okay, looking at e-commerce, what is happening? There are, in my opinion, there are two two big drivers for the development of e-commerce and digital business in Vietnam. First of all is a young tech-savvy population. I already mentioned before that the median age in the country is 30 years old. So you are talking about like 45 million people which are below 30 years old. So all these people are very tech savvy. They're not scared of trying new things, new technologies. The other thing together with this is there are like 48 million internet users. That's the highest internet penetration rate in Asia, just behind Singapore and Brunei. That's quite a significant figure for a so-called underdeveloped country like Vietnam. E-commerce revenue is growing by something like 23%, which is along the lines of the growth of sectors that I mentioned before. The other interesting thing that is having a positive impact on the development of e-commerce is that Vietnam is a country that missed the first wave of foreign investment and development in the 90s, before the Asian crisis. Countries like Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, they receive huge amounts of foreign investment that develop many sectors in their economies, and that's including infrastructure and retail infrastructure. That did not happen in Vietnam. Vietnam arrived late, then we have the Asian crisis, and then everything basically stopped for a period of something like 7 to 8 years. So when digital economy started to take off and penetrate places like Vietnam, what is happening is that there is not a real alternative in terms of physical retail infrastructure. So consumers, especially young consumers, do not have many alternatives. It's not like in more developed places where you will find dozens of shopping malls and dozens of retail options where consumers can buy the products. That's not the case in Vietnam. Even when we're looking at cities like Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, the offer of retail products is limited. So people are basically moving to e-commerce basically because it provides them a better supply of products and service at better prices. The most popular products are obviously clothes, shoes, cosmetics, household goods. Something like 35% of the people are buying home appliances through internet, which is quite interesting. Electronics and IT is also quite popular. Next. So how people are buying the stuff online? It's very similar to what Daniel mentioned about Indonesia. The preferred platforms are e-commerce platforms, like Lazada is also very successful here. People are also using AliExpress from China. People are buying directly from Amazon. And the other way they are buying is through social media. So we have a combination of formal establishments like Lazada or Amazon, and we also have like what we would call an informal economy, where individuals are selling all kinds of products through social media. They develop their own networks. They look for niche markets for specific products, develop small networks of clients, and they do it through social media. Especially Facebook is very popular, and there is another social network called Zalo, which is also very widespread in Vietnam. The main challenge and the main concern for e-commerce in Vietnam for the consumers is trust on the seller. There are not many consumer protection schemes in place. So for the Vietnamese, it's very important. The number one concern is to have trust on the seller, followed by the quality of the products. There are some, as I say, there's not much consumer protection. So there has been cases where the sellers are delivering products that do not correspond to what they were advertising. That was quite popular. So that's a key concern for consumers to have trust on the sellers, and price only come on a third place as a concern. So as long as they can afford, the very first thing they're going to be looking at is how reliable are you as a supplier. Also, in terms of e-commerce from a business-to-business perspective, there are three main drivers that are gonna help to develop the sector in Vietnam. Basically, the government is trying to promote the development of this sector with actions in three areas. First one is developing the ICT infrastructure. Second one is improving the people skills. Nowadays there is a lack of skills, of talent for e-commerce related activities. And the third one is putting in place the regulations. The government is trying to catch up, and to some extent is not, the legal framework is not very developed, and there are still many gray areas. This doesn't mean that you cannot do business, but it means that your business operating environment might change. So that's something that people might want to take into account when they plan their activities in Vietnam. Next. Here, just to finalize, I just want to wrap up giving you a couple of ideas and an example of a project that we got involved recently that might illustrate some of the issues that you might come across when you do business in Vietnam. From a business to consumer perspective, as I say, the key drivers are increasing disposable income and a large young population, which is driving the demand for all kinds of consumer products, fast-moving consumer goods, food and beverage, consumer electronics, pharmaceutical. From a business-to-business perspective, I think the key issues are that the country is developing. It relies very much on exports, but they do not have a supporting industries base, so they need to import all the intermediate goods, and that goes for almost any product that they produce here for export. They need to import the intermediates. So there are opportunities to supply these intermediates and also to provide services to these companies. One example of a project where we work recently, we're working with a global financial service company who was looking or was considering an acquisition of a local Vietnamese company who was, the Vietnamese company has developed a platform to sell and market financial services in partnership with a local bank. And we're working with a client who was considering the acquisition of that company. So basically, we're helping them with doing due diligence, and we found out two interesting things. One was that this company was very, very successful, the Vietnamese company. In a very short period of time, I'm talking about like 8 months, they went from nothing to thousands of clients using the services. So their product was very, very welcome, very successful. The other two things that we found out is that they were operating in a very gray area, which basically there were no regulations which provide some kind of safety. So there was a high risk of the government regulating that activity and basically changing the arena for that company. So that's an example. The second thing is that the company, the Vietnamese company with the local bank, with the local partner, which was a bank, there was an issue with the intellectual property and the trademarks, which wasn't clear who was the owner. So should a company get involved in that, there was a high risk of not having the brand or benefiting from the brand. So I think this is a good example to illustrate just two issues that companies can come across. One is the intellectual property issue. The other one is the lack of clear regulatory environment, which is something companies might want to consider. And just to finalize, my final slide is relevant to Vietnam and Indonesia. Basically, just a couple of tips for companies not familiar with business in this part of the world. Just say that you need to have patience. You need to understand that business space in places like Vietnam and Indonesia, it is not the same as in the United States or in Europe. And here things are not black and white. There is a lot of gray, and that's something you're going to have to live with. And the other thing is that you need to develop relationships and spend your time doing due diligence. And I think we have a poll now, so I pass it to John. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Look, thank you. I am always very impressed with the detail there, and Antonio, thank you. Those growth rates, shall we say, looking at the West, looking at Europe and the United States, those kind of numbers that we don't know. But here we go, related to this and sort of as a launch itself for the next piece, I'm going to launch the poll number 3. Here we go, please. Everybody, are you ready? Here you go. Now we're going to address the subject of localized websites. So this is putting online information for native audiences so that they can understand. This is all about domain registration. This is about translation. This is about mobile, and we know that everybody's on mobile devices today. This is about local search engines and social media. So if I give you some feedback, domain names seem to be widely understood, and local translation, people seem to get it, how important that is, and that the online content is mobile enabled. SEO is well up there, and 45% say that they're active and relevant on social media. So these are some impressive numbers. I want to say bravo. That is really very commendable and relevant for me to go, thank you so much, as I close poll number 3. And shut down and hand back to Susanna, I believe.
Thank you very much, John. Yes, I'm going to go through mine quite quickly because I wanted to save a bit of time for questions, and I do realize we're running a bit late. Just this quick slide, just to sort of refocus our attention again back onto the online side specifically, and really just try to emphasize the point about using digital online for exporters and how important exporting is to any company that wants to seriously grow. And I just put together a couple of slides just to list the things that we would talk about when we talk about a localized website. So what do we mean when we say localized website? And I've sort of grouped them together where I can, and just remember you do have these slides, slide deck coming your way, so you don't, you just sit back and enjoy them. I think the first 2 points really is just about how you have to have country-specific content, not just in terms of sort of currency, but also relevant case studies which show a direct local involvement. That is a very strong testimony, and that's particularly important in markets where you are building brand and trust in order to go down that sales process. And just sort of you don't have to redesign your website completely, but just have to be cognizant of how images and designs can differ in countries. And this is just an image of a Route 66 in the States and a slow little road in Scotland. Otherwise, we would also really encourage any localized website to highlight the multilingual navigation, and that's easiest to do it with flags, obviously. Then going with that, we really encourage people to have geolocation. This allows you to really focused in on where your prospective client is sitting, so you can directly address his issues when you're through the online website that's chosen. Obviously, we've talked quite a bit about mobile, and especially these mobile-first markets, where in 2016 actually is an interesting year because for digital marketing, mobile exceeded PCs for the first time in digital marketing in 2016. So more people had advertising on mobile than on their PC, which I think is a pretty significant thing. Then obviously content management systems, and these are the backbone of the architectural software packages that people design websites with. It's very important to have the right kind that responds well in international markets. Hosting, and this means basically allowing things to upload and download quickly, because attention spans on the internet are very brief. So you want to make them very easy to use for your user experience. Then the last sort of 3 that I would highlight regulatory environments, requirements, these are especially important for anything that you're doing in Europe and the United States, but even in markets where they're just sort of what I would call emerging markets, like Vietnam, as Antonio was saying, regulatory requirements will become increasingly important over the next decade. Even in markets where they seem to be lacking at the moment, they will emerge. Then domains, and I was very delighted to hear the response of that first poll for the websites. Many of you have bought domains. It's very important to own your digital online space, and and that starts with a domain name. And the 10th thing really is just about international marketing and social media. Right from the start, any website today has got to have some kind of social media and international marketing plan right from the very beginning. No use building the thing and then just parking it in the garage. So just talking again about Vietnam and Indonesia in particular, and these are two screenshots from a company called We're Social who documents the online world. Just in a summary, really, just going to talk about these are high growth, what are called mobile first, social media orientated markets. And they're classic of what digital online people call mobile first, which means that the infrastructure is not always available. Therefore, there's some sort of leapfrogging going on, and you conduct your business mainly through your telephone. And as both Antonio and Daniel were talking about, trust becomes really important. There's a lack of regulatory business, there's a lack of redress, and therefore trust, which is built online, gets really important to your brand. So, for example, any kind of feedback from a company, any kind of feedback from a client on your business is going to have a very big effect on your brand. We know that's important in your domestic market. It's really, really important in these mobile first markets where potential clients are really seeking to find any kind of justification and any kind of backup in order to do business with you. And that's why it ties in so well also with social media. And here I just have a little quick I took a screenshot from eMarketer, which looks at social media across the world. Indonesia's I think the 4th largest market for Facebook today. It's just incredibly important. And if you understand that Facebook also owns WhatsApp, Instagram, and other platforms, you start to realize just how huge the investment is in social media in these markets. And the top users here, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam are the top 3 for Facebook in Southeast Asia. But and as I said, on a global perspective, these markets are also amongst Facebook's top 10. There's some other information and sources out there about this, which is really just amazing numbers. Facebook is used by companies in these markets, in particular in Vietnam and Indonesia especially, much more in a much more aggressive way than we would find in sort of more established markets, even including in the United States, home of Facebook. And then I just wanted to give you another again, I guess a screenshot really of Lazada. Both Antonio and Daniel mentioned that as sort of a major e-commerce venue. They were bought by Alibaba in April 2016 for about $1 billion and are really becoming a nexus for all e-commerce in and around and online selling in and around the whole of Southeast Asia. So it's definitely one to sort of seriously watch on that side. And John, do we have time for one last poll? I realize we're very short on time.
You got it. It's coming up. Absolutely. Please, everybody, here you go. Here is our 4th poll, which sits nicely to sort of bring the subjects all together. I'm launching it now. So here we are. How about marketing internationally? How are you doing it? International trade shows, always key. Online and social media, which we've been talking about, and paid advertisement, but also, of course, distributor and manufacturers, reps, where Tractus can bring in a huge helping hand in visiting prospective international customers. So Let me give you some quick feedback. 50% are still going for international trade show. That's great. And it's actually led by 70% are saying online and social media, 60% through distributor and manufacturers reps, and 50% visiting prospective international customers. That's very interesting. Thank you. And Susanna, I hand back.
Thank you. Great. We're running behind time. I do want to leave some time for questions, but I want to leave you with also two little tiny case studies. The first really is about distributors. And this is one of the key drivers that we find a lot of our companies come to us and say, I do some business in, let's say, Indonesia. I need to have more distributors, or I need to find a good distributor. And our experience has been incredibly revealing just how strong a localized website can be in terms of finding the right distributor and reaching out to the distributor community. So the first obvious one is you take your localized website and you put become a distributor page on that website, and that really allows you to start then using that page to market it through social media, through getting out in your local market and advertising the fact that you want a distributor in that local market, and you're putting it in their language, on their forums, on their platforms. It shows a lot of things at once. One thing it shows is that you have a real commitment to that market. Secondly, it shows that you have some knowledge of that market because you're on their platforms. Third, that you're willing to put some resources behind it because you already translated some things. What it also allows you to do is really organize your distributor network, and you can download a lot of things onto your localized website to help your distributors further on, like marketing data sheets and so on. So this is something that we find works very, very well. It also works extremely well for things like trade shows. So that 50% of the audience who attend regular trade shows internationally, if you have a localized website, you can then push that out ahead of the trade show, making sure that your investment in the trade show really works well, and allowing your distributor to book his meetings via that website. So again, that's just sort of an easy understanding of how you can use localized websites. And one of the things, as I said, that we find typically is with distributors. Now, the other point I wanted to make was the necessity of controlling, nurturing, growing your brand. And both Daniel and Antonio did sort of mention this also when they talked about reputation and how important it was to have trust in that buying process, particularly in these high-growth markets which are still relatively unregulated. So trust becomes the major. And when you talk about trust, you talk about your brand. So the first thing you do really is to make sure that you own and you control your online digital presence. Do not give your domain name over to your distributor. You should own it. You will look after it better than anybody else. So really the first thing, as I said, is just make sure that you own and control your online profile. So one of the things that we find is really how to push forward that brand and nurture the brand. And in these markets, like these mobile-first markets, it's really through social media and marketing as well to increase the credibility, the awareness, and that whole feeling of trust that you get. So with that, sort of, it's all about sort of international marketing. Now I'm just going to leave you with some lists of resources where you can download more things about website localization and international marketing. And I hope that I've left a tiny bit of time for some questions. And here you go, is my final slide. If you take away one thing from my presentation, it's just basically get a localized website. It allows you to reach into markets, organize distributors, find distributors, nurture your brand, and develop your brand and sales. John, have I left any time at all for questions?
Yes, we are running late. I do like that, Susanna, and the Woody Allen slide. I wonder what he would be saying. Showing up, yep, show up online is the takeaway. And indeed, please, I'm opening up the question box, and I'm just going to do this very quickly. I guess I'm going to say, Daniel, please, IP protection can you give us a little bit of feedback on IP protection? It's the question is an issue, and how do companies cope with it? Can I hand that one off to Daniel?
I can do that.
And so go ahead, Antonio.
Oh, pardon me, Antonio, please.
Well, I think just two key ideas. One is that both Indonesia and Vietnam have IP protection regulations, and both Indonesia and Vietnam are part of international agreements. Okay, regulations are pretty well developed. The problem in both places is the same: enforcement. There is hardly any enforcement. So my recommendation for companies who have an IP concern is that they should do as much as they can to prevent infringement in the first place. So they should focus on prevention rather than on the cure. They should assess the risk of the market and make preparations. They should register their intellectual property rights. So don't assume that because your trademarks or your brand names are registered in your countries, that is going to protect you locally. That's not the case. You have to do your homework and you have to register your intellectual property locally. And I think that's it. Just prevent.
Antonio, that's a great summary. Thank you very much indeed. And Susanna, just a quick one. You've got 15 to 30 seconds on. Here's a case study. A US manufacturer says they've got a US.com English language site for the US market. They want to talk about websites in Southeast Asia. Where do they start?
Well, I think the first thing really is just to make sure that you own your domain names in the key markets that you want. So, you prioritize your markets. You say, where is my best low-hanging fruit? If it's Indonesia, if it's Vietnam, fine. Make sure that you own .vn for Vietnam, .co.id for Indonesia. So first of all, grab that. It's not a big investment, $20, to make sure that you own it. After that, just start thinking about, okay, now where are my priorities? How do I build them out? And make sure that you have really fantastic translation and input.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Then I'll dive back. There's one here, supplier, and they're looking to vet and consider distributors in Southeast Asia. So I guess that's a Tractus question. Over to Tractus. 30 seconds, please.
Yes, I can answer that quickly. And so, I mean, both an issue here in Southeast Asia is how much are your distributors actually going to work for you? And so it takes some time to identify who works within your product range, to analyze if they're working with any competitors of yours, and if they would adequately represent your brand if you're new to the market. And this is one of the more challenging situations, is to ensure that your distributor is going to work out and reach the potential clients for your products, and to get them actually motivated to do that. And so that does indeed take some due diligence, cooperation, and then setting out some specific frameworks as well as checklists for them to be able to achieve those goals. And so you can put that in contractually, or you can put that in on a milestone basis, which will help move things along a little bit better.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Andrew. That helps a lot. Susanna, a quick one for you. We have a local website, and I presume that means sort of English or American English. Do they have to have local websites for international marketing? I'm not too sure I get that, but over to you. Good luck.
I think I understand. Is basically, can you do international marketing without having a localized website? I guess you can, but you're really tying one hand behind your back by doing that. You can reach out into all kinds of different platforms internationally, but if you're not basing it via a localized website, you're not getting the full benefit of it. And so it seems like a lot of effort without the full returns. For one thing, you won't really be building up a strong database of local contacts, and you won't really be building up your brand internationally without the local website. So the short answer is yes, you can, but it's really not ideal. On a best case scenario, localized website and localized marketing work best.
Susanna, thank you very much indeed. I'm looking at the time. We are well over time, which means that there has been an awful lot of really good, useful information and content. So I would like this opportunity now to say thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you for presenting today, to Susanna, to Danielle. It has been a very, very strong presentation. Antonio, the information that you have provided. I'm going to take this opportunity to give you a round of applause. Yes, that is a sort of thank you on my behalf and from everybody else here. We're going to shut that down and say thank you indeed. Please, everybody, be aware that there's a survey and that Danielle, Antonio, Susanna will be picking up on the questions and on the survey and coming back to you. And you will, of course, be getting a copy of the recorded slide deck on Friday. So with that done, I want to say thank you so much. What a great webinar. Really a lot of useful information, and I wish you all a good day, a good afternoon, a good evening, or even good night. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, everybody, and happy exporting.
Thank you. Bye-bye.